final round of my series for the Goon tournament against Zearoth. It's now for the final round. It's gonna be Bretonia against the Beastmen. On my side, I had a fairly standard Bretonian army with a front line of spearmen, a few peasant bowmen, a few trebuchets to try and force an engagement, and 3 men at arms in the back. King Liang Kerr on his hippogriff, I think it is, with the Pegasus Knights, and some knights on the realm far over at this side who are not hidden at all and who will be used atrociously in this particular match. Meanwhile, Zearoth has gone with a very Minotaur-heavy army, with a few units of Ungor spearmen who are gonna have a pretty hard time getting much done in this battle, I believe. Bray Shaman, who's just summoned a Cygor, rather unsurprisingly, and 4 units of Minotaurs of different kinds, as well as Gorgul. 2 regular Minotaurs and 2 Minotaurs with great weapons, as well as Kasrak on the chariot. You'll notice that he's definitely seen my Knights of the Realm, and he is starting to move his troops towards that, while my trebuchets are just opening fire on whatever they can here, and I believe they only managed to kill a single Ungor spearman. And honestly, firing on those is probably gonna be a bit of a waste, since, well, they're not all that great. I do end up having to move my, I feel like I had to move my front line up a bit, seeing how a single direct hit against these spearmen all but wiped out my a unit here. That Cygor is gonna be doing a lot of work, that's for sure. I do try to well, force a bit of an engagement by doing a bit of hit and run on these flying units, but one thing I definitely should do is probably to move my guys behind the spearman formation before actually charging in, since that would probably do significantly more damage. I end up doing a fair bit, but I'm fairly sure, at least on the second charge, my Pegasus Knights are gonna take a lot of damage for pretty much no good reason. Meanwhile, if I recall correctly at this point, I pretty much have my trebuchets try to target the Minotaurs, since those are absolutely the primary force in this particular battle, and being able to stop those would pretty much spell doom for the Beastman army. Who, again, I couldn't help feel like it seemed like there was a bit of an over-reliance on the Minotaurs here, and there's pretty much no front line to try and go in and take the fire to allow the Minotaurs to go in. And, well, honestly, there's a fair bit of indecisiveness going on our part. Meanwhile, me trying to micro these Pegasus Knights around. Again, I don't really believe the damage they've taken here was worth doing a bit of damage to Ungor spearmen. But yeah, I completely forgot about my Knights of the Realm over here, who have almost lost a third of their men to Kasrak, the one who's doing a ton of work on his chariot against them, rather surprisingly. I do end up at this point moving my formations up far enough that the peasant archers are going to be able to open fire soon, while these Minotaurs, I think at this point Zearoth was trying to keep them mobile in order to take as few hits from the trebuchets as possible. But again, it seems like composition-wise he put himself at a pretty severe disadvantage by not having enough cannon fodder to allow the Minotaurs a safe approach. He does, I believe he does manage to get a pretty decent attack out of it, but yeah, we'll get there when we get there. Meanwhile, I finally realized my Knights of the Realm are being entirely useless, and they're finally pulling back with Kasrak giving a bit of chase. Peasant Bowmen doing a fair bit of damage to these unshielded and unarmored spearmen herds, who are just gonna be walking right in. Meanwhile, I start trying to put my pullmen and arms into position, but I do not manage to actually brace them, which would probably make this engagement go a lot better if I had. Meanwhile, Pegasus Knights and Liang Kerr are rear charging separate Ungor spearmen, who basically have all broken by the time these Minotaurs have reached the lines. But yeah, as you can see, this this Pullman at arms men at arms unit didn't have time to brace for the Minotaurs. They got absolutely devastated by them. That said, though, the peasant bowmen have realigned, and the other pole arms are holding the line, which means that these Minotaurs are going to be taking a lot of fire. Did send up my Knights of Realm to do a rear charge on these units, and while they've all reformed, they've taken so much damage that they're going to have an extremely hard time breaking through my own line of spearmen, which pretty much means that these Minotaurs are going to be isolated here behind enemy lines. One of them has pretty much already broken, 2 of them are almost down. He does have a pretty fresh units as well as the Gorbel, not to mention that I don't really feel like any of my knights or other units are in a position to take on the Cygor, but at this point I should probably have started moving up my my spearman at arms to at least try and tie him up instead of allowing him to just keep getting free shots. You see, he has a ton of kills by now already, and I might have, seeing how at this point there's basically no proper infantry lines to charge for the Knights of the Realm. They would probably have been better served charging the Cygor, even though the Cygor would probably kill them. They would prevent him from firing long enough to actually get a bit done. I'm fairly sure. I don't know. Did these spearmen? I think they managed to brace in time, which helps a fair bit, since these spearmen at arms, compared to basically every other standard spearman, has a charge defense against all trade, which is usually reserved for elite units like Ironbreakers. So it's definitely very important as Bretonnia to actually manage to hold the line. I used a fair few of buff spells on my damsel as well, tried to do a bit of chain lightning here. One of the a thread poster mentioned that it would be a pretty good idea to try and do the regular lightning bolt on the Cygor, who's pretty much entirely immobile. But I never. It always seemed like it's mostly a spell against engaged formation, but it's definitely something I should keep in mind to try and cast an overcharge of. At this point, I can pretty much finally bring in Leon Kerr and the rest of the remaining knights into this particular engagement, where both the Minotaurs and Kazrak have falling back. I believe at this point the Trebuchets are just trying to knock the Cygor around a bit, but they are really not accurate enough to be particularly great at that. I do try to get these Minotaurs with a lightning bolt before they can re-engage, but Zearoth did a very good job at actually moving those before that engagement in particular could happen. At this point, the battle is pretty much over. The Gorbel is in very fine health, but Leon Kerr has now re-engaged with it, and pretty much nothing else is going to be able to do all that much, with the Pegasus Knights coming in, probably just in time to get the shit kicked out of them by friendly fire. But yeah, at this point, everything just starts routing for the Beastmen, and that's gonna be a pretty. It was a pretty quick battle. This one with a pretty standard Bretonnia line against a rather unconventional Beastmen line. Whereas it's been mentioned that going mass Minotaurs against Bretonnia seems like it's not quite the way to go, and I feel inclined to agree, since all their infantry is going to be anti-large, and the Minotaurs are going to have a relatively hard time catching knights and whatnot if they do not actually want to be engaged. But yeah, that ends this particular series with 2-1, and thanks for watching, and thanks to Zearoth for some very close games that I quite enjoyed, and hopefully I'll be seeing you guys for the next set of games. Later.